mums, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I have filmed, about 3 weeks now. I did film a little bit in the hospital, but it has been a while since I've actually sat down and filmed a proper sit down video. Oliver will be 3 weeks old tomorrow, so I thought I would film his birth story before I forget all the details, because I no doubt I've already probably started to forget some of it, and I really wish that I had filmed this with Hunter, because there are a lot of things that I already have forgotten from his birth, and he's only 17 months old now. So for those of you who are new here, my name is Cassidy and I have got a almost 3-week-old son and also a 17-month-old son, and I documented my whole pregnancy of Oliver on this channel while we were hiding it from our family. So we didn't actually announce our pregnancy until Oliver was born, and we also had a surprise gender birth, which meant that we didn't know what gender Oliver was going to be until we were actually in the C-section and they delivered him. So we basically had to try and think of girls' names and boys' names before he was even born, and then finalize them once he was born, because we didn't actually know, like I said, if he was going to be a boy or a girl. So today is literally just going to be what happened the day that he was born, because if you go back on my channel you will have seen all of what happened in the couple of days and the couple of weeks leading up to him, and there was quite a lot of drama, I guess you would say, because I was in and out of hospital a lot with a lot of different complications. So if you are new here, then maybe go back to some of those videos, probably starting at around 35 weeks, and watch those updates and then watch this, and that way it will kind of clue you in as to what everything was like. So on August 14th, I was 38 weeks and 2 days pregnant, and my C-section was actually scheduled for 38 weeks and 4 days, even though I had kind of cued you guys on to believe that I wasn't having him until 39 weeks. I did actually know that they had brought it forward and was going to surprise everyone, but Oliver decided to get in the mix and actually surprise me and come even earlier. So that day we just went to the shops, my mum and I and Hunter, my other son, and just walked around, did a few bits and pieces. The day prior to that I had been cleaning the house like mad. Well, not really cleaning, but like tidying up and organising, because I knew that there wasn't long before his C-section date. So mum and Tom kept going off saying that I was nesting, but I just felt like I needed to get everything done because there was only a couple of days before then, and I know that with a C-section recovery there's not much that you can actually do afterwards. So the day that he was born, like I said, we went to the shops, we just did a few bits and pieces, picked hubby up from work at about 3:30 and came back to the house because we were selling his car at 4 o'clock. So that was all that was supposed to happen that day, and it ended up changing very quickly. So at 4:53 p.m. I was sitting on the couch in my lounge room, so I'd only been home for like an hour by the time we'd got back from picking Tom up from work, and I was just sitting there watching TV. Mum was sitting on the floor in front of me and Hunter was just running around like playing and whatever. Tom was outside on his skateboard, and all of a sudden I was just sitting there on my phone and I looked up at my mum and I just said, I think my water just broke. And it was like the most calm random response ever, because like literally I was not like freaking out, no nothing. I just said as if like you and I are just having coffee right now. And the reason why I said that was because all of a sudden out of nowhere I felt this pop and then like this massive flood, like literally like if you had a hose, it actually felt like if you put a hose in between like your thighs, and the feeling of that, or like the jets in a pool or something like that. Like it was quite strong and quite a big flow, and nothing like peeing myself at all. But I remember that it was extremely hot, like it felt like it was burning. And so I said to Mum, I think my waters have broke, which because I said it so like randomly, I think she was like, well, no one was really sure, but she got up really quickly and she's like, what do you need? And I was like, oh, I don't really know. Because my waters never broke with Hunter, so I'd never actually experienced this before. And I actually couldn't physically stand up. So Mum grabbed some towels and ran outside and told Tom, and he came inside, and those two were like in a bit of a panic, basically, as to like, no, like you need to go to the hospital now, like we need to go. And whereas I was kind of sitting there like, okay, I need to call PAC, which is the hospital, and let them know and see what they want me to do, whereas they were like, no, get in the car and then we can call them. So we grabbed my hospital bags, which were already packed. You guys would know that because I'd already been in hospital and then repacked them literally the week before. So I already had my green bag in the car because I'd only been up to the hospital on the Monday and this was the Wednesday. So anyway, we get Hunter, who is so tired, the poor kid. Put him in the car, grab my bags, get in. I'm sitting in the front of the car and I dial the number for PAC, and we're driving down the road, and at this point, like, I'd had contractions on and off for 5.5 weeks, all day and all night, so nothing had like changed, and I didn't have anything extremely painful at this point. We got 5 minutes down the road and I'm on the phone to PAC trying to talk to them, and all of a sudden I can feel like all this pelvic pain, like my lower back was aching, my pelvis was hurting, but it wasn't like period pain, which is what they usually tell you feel in labour. It was just quite intense pain and pressure. And the night before, I had what felt like Oliver was literally doing like backflips, like overly active in the last couple of days before, and I had started to feel really nauseous. In fact, a couple of days before, I actually felt like I was going to vomit and had to leave the room. So we were driving along the highway. I'm on the phone to them, telling them what's going on, and I'd put on a overnight pad when I was at home because obviously, like, if it keeps going, like, it's gonna leak everywhere, and I didn't want it in my expensive car. So we drive there, I'm sitting on a towel, and we get there, and because it was so rushed, I didn't really get much of a chance to like prepare Hunter or anything, and it was right before dinner time. So I literally like walked to the back of the car and given Hunter a kiss and like said bye to him really quickly, and while Mum and Tom like rushing me to go up to maternity. So we walk in there, we go upstairs, get in the lift. About 100 different times that night I was asked by Tom if I had peed myself, or if I was sure that I hadn't just peed myself, because I do actually have a damaged bladder. So that is quite a likely case, and had happened to me a couple of times already in that pregnancy where we weren't sure which it was. So we get up there, we walk in, and the doctor who had seen me only 2 days before in there was standing at the counter along with some other midwives, and they all knew exactly who I was before I could even tell them what I was there for, anything. And anyway, I walked in there quite awkwardly because I could just feel like constant gushing like as I was walking. So it only took me about 15 minutes to actually get to the hospital because Mum just dropped us off. We didn't park or anything. And by the time I got up there, I was getting quite intense pain, but not unbearable. So we go into this room, which is like a procedure room inside PAC, and they come in and put me on a CTG monitor, which I had quite a lot of those. You will see them in my videos. Basically, I have a couple of straps and monitors on my belly, and they measure my contractions and Oliver's movements and his heartbeat and all of that. And then they came in and did like my observations for like my heart rate, my blood pressure and all of that. So that was fine. And then they decided to come in and say that they need to test if my water's broken, which I was like, well, it definitely is, because by this stage there'd been like a good hour and I was still like gushing. Like, it was not trickling, it was quite a lot, and I could not actually physically lift my bum off the bed without like big gushes coming out. It only kind of like settled as I was like laying still. So the fluid was all just clear, there was no blood, no nothing, which was lucky. But they decided that they wanted to do a test to see if it was my aortas, because obviously if it was, I needed to have my C-section that day. And so they came back in after a while and brought in a little swab, which they put in and they leave it in for a minute and then they pull it out, put it in some other like gel or something, and it's meant to tell them if it's your amniotic fluid or your waters, which I guess is kind of like the same as they do strip tests for seeing if you've got UTIs. So anyway, the lady did that, put the swab in, walked out of the room, came back, grabbed the swab, and she said, okay, I'm gonna go test this now. It would take about 5 minutes. So she walked out of the curtains and to the outside of the door, turned around straight away, walked back in and said, never mind, it's already positive. So that was alright, except for when they wanted to do that test, I actually had to get off the bed to take like my pants and everything off. And I remember them saying like, you need to take this off, and every time I'd lift, like everything would gush. So I said to them, well, are we going to get a splash mat or something? Which they thought I was being funny because they obviously haven't dealt with that before. I don't know, because I was like, you know, we obviously need a splash mat because I can't just stand on the floor and literally leak all over the floor. So they get like what's called a bluey, which is what they usually put on the hospital bed so you don't leak all over the sheets, and put that down so that I could take them off. I had soaked all the way through the night pad, all the way through my, I had track pants on and that was all soaked and everything, so that all had to go into one of the bags. And yeah, so they came back, they said, you know, it's positive, whatever, we need to go get the doctors. And so from there we basically knew, you know, we're having him that night, although at that point we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. So they went and said they needed to call theatre, find out when they could put them in, because obviously overnight there's only 2 theatres open and they're not scheduled operations, they're left for emergencies. So they came back and said that I would be in theatre within 2 hours. About 10 minutes after that they come in and the theatre was saying that they were ready, and I hadn't been prepared. I didn't have my stockings on, I didn't have my catheter in, and so they said, no, we can't send her to theatre yet, like you need to give us another 15 minutes or so. And so that was okay. So they put my stockings on, and when they went to put my catheter in, they wanted me to sit the same as you would for like a pap smear or a cervix exam. So you have like your legs in a position kind of like a frog, and that was really difficult for me because by this point I was in extreme pain. My contractions were flat out and I actually physically felt like I could not move into that position or have that done because I was in so much pain. I'd had absolutely no pain relief that day at all. Nothing, not a single bit, not Panadol, not nothing. So I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And at that point I was in so much pain, I was like so close to just saying like, no, I can't do this, like way too much pain. And my student midwife had just arrived and she said, oh, we might be able to get you some gas if we have enough time to take before we take you up. But by the time they would have organised that, the orderlies who were going to wheel me up there had already arrived, so I couldn't have any gas, so they had to put the catheter in. And I just remember pleading with them, please do it in between a contraction. However, my contractions, when you look at the monitor, contractions go up and go down, and as they're going down, it's your belly getting softer. So I was asking them to do it in between, but the problem was as it got to the bottom, mine went straight back up again. Like they didn't actually go down for a while and then up. And so you had to kind of like time it and do it on the way down before it got tighter instead of getting it as it gets to the bottom. So anyway, they put that in and Tom had to get changed into some scrubs. And then they came in with the orderlies and they took me upstairs to the theatre room. And with Hunter, they took me up to like an anaesthetic bay and then into a theatre room, whereas this time they just took me straight into theatre. And the doctors weren't already there at that point. I had no idea who my surgeons were going to be, which was one of my biggest stresses because I didn't know who the surgeons were. going into the C-section compared to with Hunter. I actually like knew who I was supposed to have, and then it ended up changing anyway. So anyway, so we get in there and they're doing some checks. They're setting up in the room. I can see like all these instruments that look really scary, and sitting there. Anyway, I was trying not to freak out because I was in so much pain anyway. And this guy is like standing there holding my shoulders, and he's like, you know why I'm holding your shoulders, right? And I was like, oh, so I don't fall off the table. And he's like, yeah, because there'll be too much paperwork if you fall off the table. And so he was trying to have a bit of a joke and making a couple of really bad jokes. So anyway, the anaesthetist comes in, introduced himself. He's really nice. And at this point, I literally feel like I'm going to faint because I'm in so much pain. Like I could barely even, when they tried to get me to sit up and move to the other table, which is the operating table, I could barely even move there because I was in so much pain. So the anaesthetist comes over and says, oh, you know, I can't really give you any pain relief because the doctor's not here yet. We're about to do spinal. He's like, but the best I can do is give you some gas. And I'd already been sitting in the room for a couple of minutes before this happened, even though it felt like I'd been there for half an hour. And so I was like, yes, please, like, because at that point I felt like I was literally dying. And I remember it actually felt like, I mean, I don't actually know what it feels like to push your baby out, but it actually felt like to me like they were trying to come out. And so that was just incredibly painful. And I don't actually know how far dilated I ended up because they didn't do a cervix check that night. But yeah, they gave me the gas, and I remember like I grabbed the gas and he's like, you know, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. So I got this tube with the gas in it, and they hadn't done any of my consents or anything. They just basically just told me that they were waiting for the doctor. So I'm breathing on this gas, and the first couple of ones did nothing. So I was sitting there freaking out thinking I'm going to like die of pain because there was just like, it was not doing anything. And then after a little bit it started to kick in, and it was good because the pain went away, but I started to feel very foggy in the head. And when I was listening to people, I felt like I was listening to them after they were doing things. So it was everything was very disjointed and didn't flow properly, and I didn't feel like I was in control. And so I would like kind of stop for a bit to try and hear what they were saying, but every time I did that, my pain would come back. So in the end, I ended up like sucking in the gas until like felt like I was completely out of it basically. And I remember them coming over and asking me the consent for, they were explaining the problems with a spinal and if I wanted to still consent to having one. And I remember thinking to myself that it was lucky that I'd already had one before and that I knew the consents, because I would have said yes to just about anything at that point, especially when it's a pain relief. Of course I was going to say yes. So they went to do the spinal only. This time, because I had the gas, I didn't actually feel the spinal block get done at all, whereas with Hunter I did feel it because I had no pain relief while they were doing it. And so that was fine actually. Yeah, like that was probably the better spinal compared to the other one, only they did my spinal this time differently because there was morphine in it, which actually worked a lot better with my recovery. But they did that, and then they laid me down because the spinal works quite quickly. And then they set up the sheet in front of me, brought Tom over to me and sat him next to me because he had to stand on the other side of the room while they did the spinal. And anyway, they were doing the procedure and I was just kind of talking to a few different people. The doctors who ended up doing the surgery were two of the doctors who I dealt with a lot in the final weeks, who were telling me that they thought that Oliver would hang in there until 39 weeks, which were not my original obstetricians at all. So I was kind of laughing at them because when they walked in the room, they're like, oh, baby decided to come today, hey? And I was like, well, they were obviously never going to wait because they tried to come at 35 weeks. So yeah, so they were doing the procedure, and I remember I will actually insert in here the clip that I have, or part of it anyway, of Oliver's birth, but they asked me if I wanted to see Oliver, and at that point I'd already heard a little cry, but I thought that was just my mind playing with me. I didn't actually think he'd been born yet. If you're watching the clip, he's actually born before they even kind of tell me that he is. So I was like, yeah, obviously I want to see my baby. And so eventually hear him cry again, and they lift him up and tell us that he's a boy, which you guys won't see our faces because the camera's from the other side.
Delayed for clamping?
Yep.
Do you want to see the baby, Cassidy?
But that was just like pure utter shock, because we had both guessed boy, but we had obviously no actual reason to believe that. It was just a gut feeling, and neither of us had had any preference over whether we had a girl or a boy or anything. And we had talked about the name Oliver, and we'd always had the middle name Grayson picked out. It was the first name that we changed about twice. There was another name that we really liked as well. And then for girls' names, we had always been set on a middle name as well, but not set on a first name, even though we did end up like finding one that we really liked. So we're laying there a bit shocked, and a couple of seconds later, I remember Tom just looking at me and going, you know, it's a boy, like. And it was funny because it's like, no shit, like obviously we know it's a boy because we've just like kind of seen that, but it took a bit to actually register that in our heads. And so they took him away, they had, obviously you'll see in the clip that they talked about doing delayed cord clamping. Now that was something that I hadn't actually ended up making a final decision on if I wanted to do it or not. And they ended up making that decision and doing it at the time, which was fine, because I was pretty well happy for them to do whatever they thought was necessary. And then they take him away, and they didn't actually do all his measurements inside that area. Like, they didn't actually do his weight. They did his length, they did his head circumference, but he needed 20 minutes of CPAP. And I was laying on the table while they were doing that, but I couldn't figure out what they were doing. All I saw was the CPAP mask, which freaked me out a lot because Hunter had been on that for a few days after his birth, and things were quite serious when that happened. But Tom just kept standing there and telling me that it was fine, everything was okay. And so yeah, eventually he was fine. After that 20 minutes, they put him on my chest, and he was like all perfectly fine. It actually didn't really feel like 20 minutes to me, maybe more like 10 minutes, but I guess it goes pretty quick. And so they gave him back to me, stitched me up, and then I think they transferred me to another bed. And then they wheeled me out to recovery, and I was literally there for what felt like maybe 5 minutes. I felt like I was barely even there, but I wasn't in pain when I was in recovery like I was with Hunter's. They did, like I said, they did my spinal very differently this time. So pain-wise was completely different. I didn't really feel anything, and I felt fine, didn't feel funny or anything. And Oliver was doing pretty well and managed to latch on in recovery a little bit, so that was easy. So they took us straight back to the maternity ward, where I was in a shared room. And then from there, you guys will have seen the videos following on as to what happened. Basically, I stayed in bed that whole night and got out the next morning. I felt like I probably could have got up maybe about 4 or 5 hours later, but obviously you have to stay in bed because of having a C-section. You've got a catheter in and stuff, and you're at a falls risk and everything. So that was basically how he was born. He was born at 8:06 p.m. So from having my waters break at 4:53 to 8:06, everything was quite quick. And I did want to film things while I was in there, but I didn't really know what was happening because it was not planned how it was meant to have happened. I had 2 planned C-sections, and I ended up going into labour with both of my boys and having them earlier than expected. So Oliver was 8.5 pounds, so he was 3.8 kilos, and Hunter, my other son, was born a week earlier in gestation and was 3.4 kilos. So they were both very similar in birth weights. Oliver has got dark, like grey blue eyes, whereas Hunter had really light, bright blue eyes at birth. But everything was very different. I was able to take Oliver straight back to the maternity unit, whereas I couldn't do that with Hunter. He was taken to NICU. So that night at 11:30, the midwife decided that he wasn't breathing very well. He was making a grunting sound. So they did take him off me until 4 o'clock in the morning. So I kept asking him all night for him back because I wanted to be able to feed him, and they told me after an hour that he was fine and they were just looking after him for me to get some sleep. So I didn't actually sleep at all that night. I didn't feel like I could sleep because he was in another room, and so when they brought him back I was like a lot more content, which I finally asked at 3 o'clock for them to definitely bring him back to me, and at 4 o'clock they brought him back. So then I was able to try and feed him again, and then from there you guys know the rest in my other videos. So that is essentially how Oliver was born, minus a few probably little details of things that were said. But yeah, it was very quick, very fast, very unexpected. Like I said, it was 2 days before we were expecting to have him, and I went into both of my pregnancies expecting that electing for a C-section, you wouldn't go through labour beforehand, you wouldn't have all the contractions, and I went into labour multiple times. I ended up going into labour with Hunter the day that he was born, and then I went into labour 3 times with Oliver. So yeah, 4 labours in 2 out of my 4 pregnancies, and both were meant to be planned C-sections. Absolutely not what I expected at all. And I remember that I was told at birth class only a week prior that only 10% of women actually have their waters break before their labour starts, and that it does not gush, it just trickles out or comes out slowly. And for me, I happen to be one of that 10%, which I never expected, and I did gush because I gushed all the way up until theatre, so a couple of hours, which was crazy because I remember just telling everyone like it's still going, and hours later it's still going. And I honestly thought that if you got a big gush that was like one big gush and then after a couple of minutes it was over, but this just kept going for so long. So that's it for Oliver's birth story. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was definitely not what I expected, and I do wish that I had been able to get a bit more on camera, but like I said, it just went so fast.